Good morning. Good to see everyone. Before we jump into this very important and special service this morning, I just wanted to make sure that everyone had read or heard or seen the news that our most esteemed and beloved colleague, Justin Murphy Mancini, in the halo of light, as he's playing, our director of church music, has accepted a position as assistant professor, Paul Fritz Endowed Chair of Organ Studies and Performance at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. That's a mouthful, but if anyone deserves a mouthful, it's Justin. If you didn't see the email, you can read more about it. Both Justin and I sent a note that came in the email on Friday. He'll be with us through June, so good things ahead, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew. So thank you.
Well, it's hard to top that. Good morning, and welcome to the First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts. My name is Sue Fasoli, and I am chair of the Anti-Racism Initiative. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're glad to have you here. We come together at FRS online and in person, committed to love, peace, and justice. Our mission and our invitation to you all is to come as you are, to journey together in love, act with courage, and transform our world. If you're worshiping online and would like to access this morning's order of service, please click on the link just below the live stream. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal, please ask an usher and they'll be happy to help you. Please read your order of service to learn about the many activities and events happening here at the church. We hope everyone is signing up for one of our Congregational Insight Team workshops. These are important 2-hour discussions where you will share your hopes and dreams for our church over the next 5 years. What we learn will establish specific and concrete actions that will advance our mission, values, and ends. There are several dates available, which you can see in your order of service, and I believe that there are sign-up sheets out in the front hallway. We also hope that everyone will join us here next Sunday afternoon, January 21st at 3 p.m., for a special concert presented by the Spirituals Ensemble, featuring youth singers from the Boston Arts Academy. This concert explores the evolution of African American sacred choral music tradition. There's a link in your order of service if you'd like to purchase tickets in advance. This will be a spectacular program, so you won't want to miss it. Everyone is welcome. Please see Reverend Rebecca if ticket price is a barrier. And lastly, everyone is invited to join us downstairs in the lower meeting house after the service for a special Justice Sunday. After soup and salad, we'll be joined via Zoom by members of 3 other UU congregations who will share their experiences with us about their process of adopting the 8th principle. This is a great opportunity for us to learn from these other congregations. At last year's annual meeting, we were happy to receive a unanimous vote to support further exploration of the 8th principle and what its adoption might mean for us at FRS. The work of our anti-racism team during the past year has focused on learning how the 8th principle has influenced the work of other congregations and sharing UUA resources about the 8th principle. We've offered educational programs, including Living the Pledge workshops, to improve our understanding of implicit biases and microaggressions, and the acclaimed 1619 project series, which provided a historical context for the racial injustices that continue today. Over the years, many of you have attended the Seeing White workshops that were led by Julie Parker Amory, and have welcomed and supported the Afghan families who made our parish hall their temporary home after immigrating to the United States to escape oppressions in their own country. We've learned about the history of slavery, racism, and oppression in and around Newburyport and in our own congregation from Sid Rashke and Glee Woodworth. I believe that these experiences have increased our awareness and understanding of the effects of systemic racism and our need to step up as allies to promote equal treatment and justice for all. In anticipation of a vote to adopt the 8th principle at our annual meeting in June, we invite you to continue this exploration through congregational conversations and learning together. The words of the 8th principle are printed on the cover of your order of service. What do these words mean when referring to spiritual wholeness or beloved community? What actions might we take to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions, individually and as a congregation? And how might the 8th principle influence the work of your social action group? By adopting the 8th principle, we will join other UU congregations committed to supporting the BIPOC community and take steps, or the next step at least, in our journey to promote justice for all people. Thank you for being here this morning. It is good to be together.
Our call to worship this morning are familiar words of Rumi added onto a little with my own. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come even if you have broken your vows 100 times, 1,000 times. Come, we who are gathered here today, where everyone is welcome, in all of our brokenness, and in all of our wholeness, and in all of our hope. Young, old, able-bodied, differently bodied, diverse in our bodies, our beliefs, our gender identity, our needs, black, brown, white skin. Come, yet again, come. You are faithfully called to worship. Let's join our voices in our opening hymn, number 1023. It's in the teal hymnal, Building Bridges.
We're going to do this one a little differently this morning. I'm going to lead this half of the congregation. The choir will lead this half. We will sing the song all the way through once, and then we will sing it a few times together as a round. Enjoy building a musical bridge, as it were, between the two sides of our congregation. So, everybody with me the first time. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Starting with this side. Building bridges between our divisions, I will to bridges. Will you reach our divisions with all of our voices and reach out our visions with friends we could make such sweet of our visions. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach our divisions with all of our voices and reach out our visions with friends we could make such sweet of our visions, friends we could make such sweet harmony.
Good morning. I'd like to invite members of the Anti-Racism Initiative to come forward to light the chalice. Please join in saying our chalice lighting words as we light the chalice. The words can be found in the order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Each Sunday, we also light 2 candles of peace, representing 2 places on earth we lift up and remember as a sacred encounter with our world. We know there are untold numbers of places on earth that need peace. These 2 we will especially hold close in this service and through the week ahead. After each candle is lit, I will invite you to respond by saying peace in 3 languages: peace, salam, shalom. Our first candle this morning is lit for domestic violence victims in Massachusetts. Domestic violence-related homicides in our Commonwealth increased 55% in 2022, according to a recently released report of the Commonwealth's Domestic Violence Fatality Reviews team. People of color are disproportionately represented among domestic violence victims. To this we respond, peace, salam, shalom. Our second candle this morning is lit for the city of Lawrence, where the family of Dismarie Magia is mourning her death. Dismarie was a 21-year-old mother of 2, immigrant from Dominican Republic. She was murdered on Christmas Day in a domestic violence crime. In her honor and memory, we respond, peace, salam, shalom. And we light an additional candle this morning in honor of the blessed memory and work of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. How do we put words to the legacy of that single individual and all that he did? So may our commitment to justice carry forth his commitment, his vision of beloved community. And in this we say together, peace, salam, shalom. Let's join together in our affirmation of faith, followed by the doxology. If you could please rise and embody your spirit. The words are in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Good morning. I would love to invite any children that are here with us today to come on up. We're going to listen to a story. Yes, all right. Hi, friends. So, let's see. Can you guys all come? I want you to be able to see. We're going to be showing some pictures today. So you can sit like all in here. You can sit all in here. All right. And actually, you guys can sit and I'll let you know so you're not just all standing. I have some volunteers helping me out this morning. And you two loves, I'm going to stand right there. You don't want to switch that way or that way. If you're just looking at my bottom, feel free to move. So today, we're going to hear this story. It's called Race Cars. It's by Jenny DeVenny. This is a story about two best friends, a white car and a black car. So these cars, they have different experiences and they face different rules when entering the same race. Yes. Oh, Theo wants to know if they represent white people and black people. I think, what do you think? Yeah. It's a metaphor. That's what it is. Now, I'm looking at this book. It also says that this is a children's book about white privilege. White privilege? Theo? Yeah. So, yes, this is exactly what I was going to say, Theo. So another way to say what Theo's saying is that, well, first of all, like, what's privilege? Privilege is when someone has an advantage that they haven't earned. Like, if you were racing your friend, but your friend was given a head start. And white privilege is when people who are white have additional benefits and advantages, like a head start, and they have fewer obstacles to overcome than people of color. So we are going to explore that in this story today, and then we all are going to go down to Young Church and talk a little bit more about it, because it's pretty complicated, and just so you know, everyone here, we are all learning about this. And so it's really special to be in a community where we can learn about this together. All right, so let's get going. This is Chase. And I'm gonna have Nash hold up Chase. Chase is a black race car. And this is Ace. That's you, Finn. I'm right next to your best friend. Okay. So they live in a world with lots of other race cars. Big ones, small ones, short ones, tall ones, old ones, new ones, brown ones, blue ones. They've been best friends forever, and for as long as they can remember, they've been training together for the world-famous annual car race. Last year, they were finally old enough to enter the race. For as long as anyone could remember, every year when the big race came around, a white car would win the race. A white car would win third place, second place, and first place, until last year. Last year, Chase won first place, and Ace won third place. Sometimes competition can come between friends, but not for these two. Ace was so happy for Chase, and Chase was so happy for Ace. They loved to race, and they did not care about place. Whew, there were, however, some cars that did care about place. They were on the race committee. Theo, do you want to hold race committee? No one had ever seen them, but everyone knew who they were. They were a group of white cars that made all the rules for the annual race car race. And when the committee heard about Chase winning, they were not happy. A black car had never won first place. They did not want things to change. We have always given white cars the fastest tires and the most powerful engines, they roared. How could a black car have won? For the next race, the committee decided to change a few of the rules to make it easier for the white cars to win and harder for all the other cars. And they all agreed, except for one. This is Grace. This is Grace. Where am I? Something did not feel right to her. She was used to things not feeling fair. After all, Grace was the youngest committee member and the only girl. But she didn't say anything because everyone else felt so strongly. Now, next year rolled around and Chase and Ace were ready to race again. They'd spent all summer training and they knew the route by heart. Start your engines. Chase started off faster than ever. He zipped around the track as the crowds cheered him on, once around the track, straight through the cornfield, through the magical forest. Chase was getting ready to cross the bridge when he noticed a sign that had not been there before. The sign, yes, I will. I'm just taking a breath. The sign said, "Bridge is for white cars only. All other cars must go around the river." Chase paused for a second. That's strange, he thought. But he did not want to waste any more time. Chase sped around the river as fast as he could and jumped over the finish line. Even without taking the bridge, Chase managed to come in second place. Ace came in first place. Ace was so happy for Chase, and Chase was so happy for Ace. They loved to race and did not care about place. But back at home, something was really bothering Chase. It just did not seem fair that the bridge was for white cars only. Was he not as good as the white cars? Was something wrong with him? He shrugged it off and decided to train even harder for next year. Back at Ace's house, Ace was snuggled up in bed, smiling. He did not expect to be faster than Chase. In their practices, Chase was always the fastest. I must be getting so much faster, thought Ace. He drifted off to sleep, dreaming of next year's race car race. And back at the committee, the white cars were still not happy that Chase had won second place. They decided to change more rules to make it even easier for the white cars to win, and even harder for all the other cars to win. Grace did not think this was fair, but she didn't want to lose her place at the table, so she stayed silent. The next year rolled around, and Chase and Ace were ready to race. Get ready. Chase started off faster than ever. He zipped around the track as the crowds cheered him on. Then he whizzed through the cornfields in record time. He made it to the Blue Mountain in the blink of an eye. But at the top of the mountain, At the top of the mountain, a race officer stopped him. "Pull over, please. I need to see some identification." Chase paused for a second. That's strange, he thought. None of the white cars seemed to be getting stopped. But he did not want to waste any more time, so he showed the officer his identification. He continued the race through the magical forest. Chase sped around the river as fast as he could, and he jumped over the finish line. But because the race officer stopped him, Chase did not place, and Ace came in first instead. Chase was happy for Ace, but they were both upset about Chase's race. They loved to race, and they didn't care about place, but the committee had just announced a new rule. Cars that didn't place this year could no longer race next year. Next year, Chase would not be allowed to race. Back at home, Chase was devastated. He loved to race. What would he do now? Chase couldn't help feeling like he wasn't as good as the other cars. But he felt like something was definitely wrong with him. Why else would he not be allowed to race? That night, Chase cried himself into a long, deep sleep. But back at Ace's house, Ace was snuggled up in bed, but something did not feel quite right. He didn't understand why Chase didn't place. He's the fastest car I know. Now, back at the building where the race committee held their meetings, Grace tried to speak out against Chase being pulled over in the race. She knew it wasn't fair, and some of the members agreed, but others didn't. Grace stood up, and she said, "We need to change the rules of this race to make it fair and equal for all." "Yes, we agree," whispered two more of the cars. But most remained silent, and they ignored her. They were afraid of change, and they didn't want to lose their space at the table. So, the next year, Chase went to the race to cheer on his best friend. Ace started off faster than ever. He zipped around the track as the crowds cheered him on. He whizzed through the cornfields in record time, and he made it up Blue Mountain in the blink of an eye. Ace was heading for the magical forest when he came to a forked road with two separate paths, and there was another sign. He had never seen it before. And the sign said that white cars could go on ahead, and that all other cars had to take the longer path through the magical forest. Now, Ace wanted to know what was down the other path. He wanted to understand what was the race like for his friend Chase. So he took a right, and he went down the longer path instead of the shorter one, and he got lost. Back at the track, the race committee was starting to get worried about Ace. No one could find him anywhere. They decided that they needed to send the fastest race car to look for him. And they said, "Well, the fastest race car is Ace." And then Grace stood up again, and she said, "No!" Everybody turned to see where that voice had come from. And it was Grace. She couldn't stay silent anymore. This time, they would listen. "The fastest race car is Chase," she said, "even though we did not ever let Chase have a fair race. Take down those unfair signs. If we let Chase race at his fastest pace, he'll be able to find Ace." Although Chase was still upset that the committee didn't allow him to race this year, he agreed to help save his best friend. He zipped around the track, and the crowds cheered him on. He whizzed through the cornfields in record time. He made it up Blue Mountain in the blink of an eye. And when he got to the magical forest, he saw Ace speeding towards him. And Ace said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to realize how much harder it was for you to win this race." And the best friends embraced. And then together, Ace and Chase finished the race. And now we're going to go downstairs and talk a little bit about this story. Would you all please join us in singing the Children to Young Church? Hymn number 413.
Good morning. For me, the proposed eighth principle is the long past due corollary to the first two principles of Unitarian Universalism. Our first two principles call us to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and to seek justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. For a long time, I didn't grasp the depths of these extraordinary promises. I felt I lived my life as a good person. I sought to adhere to that old biblical admonition to render no one evil for evil. I worked where I could to assist others less fortunate than myself, and I believed that the world was evolving to be a more just and equitable place. Then, ever so slowly, I began to see how my belief was more a function of my position of privilege than it was a clear assessment of the world as it really is. Without going into a lot of details, I'll just say that volunteering for a decade and a half to support urban public education taught me a great deal. I saw firsthand how the promise of equitable treatment was being denied the largely black and brown students of our nation's largest cities. Then, like many of us older white Americans, I sat home during the pandemic and through a much wider lens was shown the reality of how unfair life was for so many people of color in our country. On that sunny January morning 3 years ago, Ms. Amanda Gordon inspired so many of us with her poem, The Hill We Climb. I too was moved to join this work of our church that spring. Of all the inspiring words Ms. Gordon spoke that day, these continue to call to me. It's because being an American is more than the pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. The eighth principle calls us to step into our collective past and to examine it. It calls us to move forward and dismantle systems of oppression we have built or have allowed to be built in our names. This new promise and the work it demands enables us to truly live into the commitments in our first two principles. This is daunting work, but in many ways it's at the center of this church's chosen mission to transform our world. It is also the work that our times demand. So I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to get more involved, to learn more and to have your questions answered. Come to the congregational conversations about the eighth principle starting after church today. We'll learn how other U congregations have developed as a result of making this extraordinary commitment. I hope you'll join me in supporting our church's adopting of the eighth principle at our annual meeting on June 11th, and thanks for listening.
Good morning.
Morning, morning, morning.
When I was asked recently if I might say a word about FRS and the importance to me of our adopting the eighth principle, I was initially hesitant. I was just not sure what I could say. I'm not sure what would be of interest to you or anyone, and what would be relevant to this moment in time. All I understood was what I felt in my core, namely that it was obvious to me personally that FRS should embrace the eighth principle and incorporate it with the other fundamental tenets that undergird our church and this congregation. This was obvious to me in part because of my own journey of self-discovery over many years, focused on racial justice and equity, the roots of American democracy, and the glaring flaws and fragility of some most basic foundational elements upon which our society rests. Such a journey of self-realization has included, among other things, several FRS-sponsored opportunities which have been both thought-provoking and deeply meaningful to me, including the recent 1619 Project discussion groups, and starting in 2021, conversations stemming from the Seeing White podcast series. There have been many other points of interest and enlightenment along the way, including books such as Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, Debbie Irving's Waking Up White, and Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, and podcasts like Blind Spot's Tulsa Burning and Reveal's Mississippi Goddamn, to name just a few. But what makes me so sure about the urgent imperative for FRS to adopt the eighth principle is what I see happening in the U.S. today. An urgency that has only been amplified since George Floyd's murder in May 2020, the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the sadly predictable pushback from nationalist and other hate groups. Today, now 2024, in a presidential election year, facts and science are still under siege. The denial of reality is practiced daily by millions of Americans, and powerful interests seem bent on tearing down the rule of law and blatantly ignoring fundamental principles of fairness and justice. Much of what I see going on is, I think, fueled by a strong racial animus, an undercurrent marked by a white supremacist vision that promotes bringing back a time of Jim Crow, separate and unequal in our country. This is dangerous and wrong, but I believe compels each of us to action. The adoption of the eighth principle is one small but visible and enduring action we can take as a church community to help steer us all towards justice and the measurable dismantlement of racist oppressions in our nation and ourselves. We're on the cusp of celebrating FRS's 300th year. I say we herald the start of our 4th century here by committing to and acting for positive change. Thank you.
The generosity of our community is an essential ministry that supports the work of the church, both in Newburyport and beyond. Each week, 50% of the Sunday offering, not designated as a pledge, goes to a local community partner engaged in important efforts to transform our region. Our January shared collection goes to support the work of our partner, Nourishing the North Shore. The mission of Nourishing the North Shore is to ensure equal access to healthy local food to members of all North Shore communities in a manner that builds community, fosters connection, and promotes dignity and self-reliance. The seeds of Nourishing the North Shore were sown from the FRS program Stir the Pot. Let's keep stirring. To give online, please use the link in your order of service or below the live stream. You can always mail a check to the church as well. Thank you. The offering will now be gratefully received. Each week, we lift up the joys and sorrows of our beloved community. Nancy Kidd, our pastoral care associate, will light the candles as I read what has been shared. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow to be read in the service, you can always send an email to betweenus@frsuu.org or write in the book that is located in the vestibule. We light a candle of joy and celebration this morning and wish Erin Hutchinson Himmel a very happy birthday. And we light one other candle representing all the joys and sorrows, though unsaid, are held in just as much love and care. And I invite you to join in spirit of prayer and meditation. Gracious Spirit, we are grateful for this day, which points us toward openings and beginnings. We have opportunities today to listen, to share, to offer compassion. We can grow in spirit today simply by being present and mindful. Help us to be present. Help us to pause, to connect to our own deepest self. We ask to be reminded that we are all connected to all living beings, even those whom we dislike, those whom we see as other. We all share a spark of something beautiful, fierce, and tender. May all living beings be healthy. May all living beings be held in love. May all living beings live in peace. Amen, and blessed be.
Beautiful. Thank you, choir. I wish to speak with you this morning about whiteness. As you know, the 8th principle is about racism and other forms of oppression. I am a white woman. We are a predominantly white congregation. I live in Newburyport, a white city, and the communities around us are predominantly white. The 8th principle will offer us an opportunity to elevate, to actively elevate our commitment to dismantle systems of oppression. This is so important for us because racism is a problem that belongs to white people. Now let me be clear when I say that. Racism is a problem that belongs to white people. I acknowledge that, of course, it is people of color who have been so brutally, unjustly harmed and suffered for 400 years by racism. But when I say racism is a problem that belongs to white people, I mean it was created intentionally by white people, sustained by systems that are controlled and dominated by white people. And white people benefit economically. I think we suffer spiritually, but we benefit economically. That is what I mean. And despite variations here in our health, in our economic status, in our physical abilities, I would argue that as white people in Newburyport or in this area, we are living in a cloud of white privilege. And most of the time, I am, and I believe many of us are, oblivious, which is understandable because it is the nature of privilege to be invisible. We are like the proverbial goldfish in the water, oblivious of the waters in which we swim. One form of white privilege that I've come to appreciate more in recent years is freedom from racial fear. Have you ever experienced being afraid because you're white? That is to say, have you been afraid that you would be harmed, physically harmed, because you are white? In 2018, I experienced racial fear, being very afraid that I could be physically harmed, even killed, because I was a white woman. I was in South Africa. I was very far north, 6 hours north of Johannesburg, way up in the wilderness. I was traveling with a South African friend who is also a white woman. We had been warned repeatedly to get to wherever we were going, to arrive at our destination by 6 o'clock at night, by sundown, and to stay in locked quarters, not to go wandering about. And we had been warned to have a reliable car that would not break down. I was standing in the parking lot of the hotel in which we were staying, and I struck up a casual conversation with a white man who happened to park next to me. And I said something like, "This is a beautiful country you have." And he said, "Yes, it is, except for one problem, the blacks." He said that he and his family owned a farm nearby, and it had become too dangerous for him as a white man to stay on the farm. He said that there had been raiding parties from the radical wing of the ANC, the African National Congress, who had been raiding white-owned farms and killing the farmers who owned them and their wives. He said that there had been a murder each night for the last of the 5 nights, and he continued on saying that he and his family still worked the farm with other people, with other help, but they would not stay there at night. He pointed up to the road and he looked up the road and he said, do you see that or smell that? And I looked up and I could see and I could smell smoke. And I said, "What's going on?" And he replied, "They are burning tires and they have blockaded the road." And I said, "Why would they do that?" And he said, "To make us afraid." Well, that night I was afraid. I was very afraid. I was afraid that the hotel would be raided and that I could be murdered for being there, for being a white woman. And the thought kept coming back to me over and over again that I could be murdered by someone who would not know my name. And somehow that's made it seem even more horrible and more scary, that I could be murdered by somebody who would not know my name, nor anything about my life, nothing about me. And then it came to me that this is what it must be like to be black in America, right? Especially black people, and especially young black men, are murdered by people who do not know their names or anything about their lives. That night, I was very afraid, and we had dinner in the hotel restaurant, and the hostess, who was white, looked agitated, and she looked very anxious. And I said to her, "Are you afraid because of the raids?" And she said, "Yes, I am," and she lived there. That night, I was so frightened that I actually moved the furniture in my hotel room and pushed the chairs and the desk and everything up against the door, as if that would do anything. And the next morning, I said to my friend, I told her how afraid I had been, and she said, "Well, why didn't you tell me you were so afraid?" And I said, "Well, what would you have said to me?" And she said, "I would have told you, if they shoot through your glass windows, lock yourself in the bathroom." Somehow that did not make me feel better. That experience of racial fear was an embodied experience. You know, that night I was literally shaking with fear, and I did not sleep a wink. So the racism moved, it shifted for me from being a problem about which I cared to being a visceral experience of being afraid for my life. And I had never had that experience before, not in the United States, not in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not in the city of Newburyport. I think sometimes it takes leaving a predominantly white area to become aware of the fact that this country is set up for us as white people. Everything is set up for us. And most of us can arrange, if we choose to do so, we could arrange to live our lives in such a way that we never have to leave areas dominated by white people. Of course, there are many more subtle forms of white privilege. I am not afraid to walk alone or with friends anywhere in the city of Newburyport. I'm not afraid if I'm stopped by the police. I've never been questioned about who am I, what am I doing here, do I belong here? I'm not worried that my grandchildren would ever be bullied at school because of their race, nor do I wonder if they will have teachers, mentors, coaches, role models of their own races. I feel safe and secure here. And in this beloved community, I look around and I see who is here. And you are my beloved community. And I think about who is not here. And then I imagine, what if people of color came in and looked around? What would they see and what would they be thinking about? I see the proud images of 300 years of leadership. I see these names on the tablets. We have a proud history. And they are all white leaders. We're all white leaders. And there are images in the vestibules of leaders from our past, beloved leaders, also white. There are images of multicultural images in this building, but they're not in the public spaces. They're in Reverend Rebecca's office. They're in Julie's office. They're there, but not in the public spaces. And I think about our other cultural forms of expression. Everything in these services, from the ways that we do or do not touch each other or shout out in church. We express ourselves in cultural ways that are very familiar to me because they're from my own cultural traditions. I feel that I belong here. But what of other people? What of people of color? We have made strides in the last few years. I do believe that FRS is more credible today than it was a few years ago, and that now in the larger community, we are seen as a first responder when there are incidents of hate or discrimination. We show up. The community counts on us, and we do show up. And I believe about 80 of us have now participated in the wonderful, excellent programs, anti-racist programs that Julie and the anti-racist team have put together. But let us be honest. We have not made as much progress in becoming a racially diverse congregation as we would like. And as soon as I say those words, I immediately think about Newburyport and the barriers, and they are significant. I mean, the issue of housing alone is a formidable and daunting problem. But we have to ask, how welcoming is this city? And how welcoming are we as a congregation? As we approach our 4th century, we need to ask which of our traditions will we continue, which serve us well in our quest for justice, and which might unintentionally be keeping us as white as we are. Let me ask each of you, on a scale of 1 to 10, you don't have to raise your hand, how comfortable or confident are you in speaking about white privilege and about white supremacy? If we are truly to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression in ourselves and in our institutions, then we must develop the knowledge and the skills to become competent in this space. Audre Lorde once said, "We cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." I say, we cannot dismantle the systems that keep this city and this church so white without understanding these systems and our own privilege. For without that understanding, how will we know what to change? It is white privilege that sustains the racial status quo and our racially segregated housing. So I am advocating this morning that we commit to the 8th principle, knowing that in doing so, we are committing ourselves to stepping up to new levels of proactivity and accountability. The commitment to dismantling systems of inequality will put us on a long and hard path forward. But perhaps what is important is not getting to a utopian end state, but as white people owning that this is our work to do, to being on that path, to continuing in the struggle and standing in solidarity with our BIPOC leaders and brothers and sisters. Finally, I would say I have been part of this congregation for 10 years now, and what I know about this congregation is this. When we commit to doing something, we honor those commitments. We are honorable, responsible advocates for social justice. Believing as we do in the inherent dignity and worth of every person, I believe that racism is sacrilegious. I do believe that in each of us there is a spark of the divine. So any action which denies the full humanity or diminishes the full humanity of any person is therefore sacrilegious. While it may be painfully slow, the arc of history does bend towards justice. As a predominantly white religion, Unitarian history is full of moments which, from a racial perspective, some are painful and some are moments of pride. But we find ourselves right now at a moment in history where there is a lot going on, which makes me feel powerless. But we are not powerless in the context of this struggle, this fight for justice. As white people, we can choose to educate ourselves, to raise our voices, and to change where we need to change, to be on the right side, as the arc of history makes that bend. May it be so. May we make it so. Amen.
So I'm sitting here thinking, oh, what do I do? We're so white. It's 11:35. Yeah. You know what? I will be damned if I do and damned if I don't. If I don't share these words, there'll be some people who say, you didn't. If I do, so I'm just going to ask us to get a little more hungry and take 6 minutes and let me share a few words, most of which, and to start with, thank you. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of this service, who's made this service possible, who've shared your commitments and your experiences and your wisdom and your ministry. We are free when the oppression of all people ends. That is a precept known in all world religions. This is something scientists agree to if we think about climate change, and I could go on and on and on. We are free when the oppression of all of life, all people, all beings ends. When our earth is cared for, when Black women and immigrants and the elderly are given the care and respect they deserve, we're all free. When Indigenous grandmothers and Hispanic children and veterans are respected and listened to, we are all free. We are all free when members of the LGBTQ community are not afraid for their lives. When parents of Black children do not have to give them the talk. We are free when everyone is free. That commitment to what I would call communal or universal salvation, by which I only simply mean that people live in freedom, safety, where their rights are cared for. It's just one of the reasons that the eighth principle matters to me. Any religion that focuses exclusively on me isn't my understanding of Unitarian Universalism. We cannot live for ourselves alone. Our lives are inextricably interconnected with everyone else and everything else, as we've heard this morning, even those we don't know, even those who live across the globe. Ours is the third congregation that I have served as a minister and have worked with around issues of commitment and engagement with social justice and particularly racial justice. One of the congregations before this was at a time of needing to reinvigorate their activism, and yes, it was in an urban setting. It started with a book discussion, and it led to creating deep partnerships with a local Black church and partnering with others in the community to establish a refugee resettlement initiative. That congregation needed renewed energy, fresh focus, new leadership. Re-engaging with their work in racial justice did all of those things. It brought new energy, focus, and leadership to the church, but it did more than that, some of which is hard to put into words. The best I can say is that it brought their already vibrant and healthy church into the streets. It made the church part of the community in real and tangible ways, and it continues, to do this important work for racial justice and their surrounding communities. And I'm so proud of them, and I love them dearly in New London, Connecticut. The other congregation faced different challenges. This congregation that I'm describing was split between members of the congregation who were involved with the church because of their social justice work. They were very engaged in the work of justice in the city of Boston, and others in the congregation who believed that church was about spirituality, not those things. Justice was something you did and talked about outside of worship. This tension had been increasing for several years before I arrived and worked with them as their interim minister. For 2.5 years we worked on that split, and together we healed that division. It took a lot of honesty, hard work, and some very difficult conversations. Nothing was more meaningful to me than to watch those on each side come to appreciate and grow from the others. Worship became something everyone loved and everyone came to, even those who carried the biggest picket signs and did the most work at the State House. They came to worship. They understood. It inspired them. It gave them the ability to be kind and loving and patient and persistent as they stood in front of the State House again and again and again. And then, in 2016, when many of us were in that march through Boston with thousands of other people, and I saw the people who said church is only for Sunday worship. That's when I knew it was okay to say goodbye and farewell, and we've done good work together. So when I came here, The congregation's work with racial justice was important to some people, though there was shared frustration among them about how to move it forward beyond book groups and into partnerships, hands-on work, partnerships with others committed to this work. When George Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020, this congregation was galvanized to work for racial justice, like many churches and organizations around the country. We hung our Black Lives Matter sign on the outside of the church, and we repaired it when it was vandalized. Over 100 people from the community at large and our congregation came to the flag dedication ceremony when children revealed the fixed sown flag. And I must be honest and tell you, members of the congregation called and emailed me every day during that time. Every day. What are we doing to support the work for racial justice, Reverend Rebecca? What are we doing? How are we showing up? What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? We have to do something, they said, you said, again and again and again. And we did. You've heard about a lot of that this morning, seeing white groups, taking in the Afghan family, being active in the city celebrations of Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day, serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, and more. Slowly, as things died down in the media, and the killings of Black people by police was gaining less attention, the calls and emails to me declined. Our anti-racism initiative began having trouble getting people to sign up for programs. Interest appeared to be dwindling. Then we brought the Afghan family next door and involvement soared. The work and commitment we had to that family and to all of the Afghans in our city transformed us. Now the family is in their own home, miraculously. And people are starting to say to me, what are we going to do with Parish Hall now? Can it become a refugee center? Can it be a community center? Is there going to be room for us and our needs? I really hope you come to the Congregational Insight workshops. Share your thoughts, share your dreams, share your opinions about the priorities of this church over the next 5 years. Let's not let our commitment wane. Let's be the congregation that is in this work for the long haul, just like we are and need to be, even more with our commitment to climate justice, gender justice. These things are not mutually exclusive. This work is not siloed into other work. It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected in the work for justice, and it's all interconnected in the health of our congregation and in our own spiritual wholeness. I can think of no better way than to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., than to move this commitment to the eighth principle forward by a congregational vote and public statement of our commitment to this work, along with our other commitments, as they are so interconnected. I do hope you'll join in learning more, engaging in the dialogues, come downstairs, hear what other congregations do, ask your questions, be bold, share with us why you don't understand. Share, so we can learn together and talk. Thank you. Amen, and blessed be. Let's rise, embody our spirit, and sing our closing hymn before soup. We'll Build a Land, number 121.
Where
Please remain standing. Let's join in our unison benediction as Jane extinguishes the chalice. The words are in your order of service. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. Again, everyone's invited to join us downstairs. My friends, wherever we may go for the rest of this day, for the days in the week ahead, for the weeks, the months, and the years to come, may we go lifted up by this beloved church congregation, spiritual community. Here may we find meaning. May we be challenged. May we know that we belong, that our voice belongs, and that we grow so much richer by the diversity here within this beloved faith community. May we do the work of justice. May we live and be deep spiritual beings. May we know that each and every day we have is a gift, and may we, in our own ways, create peace on this earth. Amen, and blessed be.